Thanks for coming back. We're getting ready to jump into segment two, and we're going to talk about responding to a competitor's move. So, in the first segment, we spent our time talking about, five different types of potential moves that a company can make to establish themselves in the market. And now we're going to spend some time talking about what your company, either a company you work for or the company you own, maybe it's a small business, maybe an entrepreneur, but as a leader of a company, how you would respond to a competitor's move in your market. And when we're talking about responding to competitors' moves, it's a strategic decision of you in a leadership position to position your company in such a way that you can respond to these competitive moves. And you have to discern, have to determine choosing what moves to make yourself and how to respond to competitors' moves. So those are two options or two decisions that you as a leader have to make. So you have to know what you're going to do, and you have to understand what your competitor's going to do, and it becomes a game of chess, and move, counter move. And the text talks about, and there's a quote in the text, they talk about the fear of being left behind triggers a lot of really stupid stuff. And that's an extremely true statement, because you have leaders of businesses that are trying to determine what they're going to do to be successful, and they have trouble how to react. Should they even react at all? And at the end of the day, these are extremely difficult decisions, and a lot of executives drop the ball when they're trying to respond to a competitor's moves. And the text talks about the level of competition tension, that's what they call it, and they talk about awareness, motivation, and capability. And they throw out again, academics love acronyms, so they throw out the acronym AMC: awareness, motivation, capability. And they talk about, I guess the example they gave in the text was Schick and Gillette when they were talking about razors and how they were responding. And then they throw out another little quote in the text that they say the best defense is a good offense. They pull that from sports, and I think that's true. The best defense is a good offense, and the results of a series of moves and counter moves are often difficult to predict, and miscalculations can be costly. And that's why leaders in companies struggle. It's not so much that they are thinking about the positive impacts of making a move or a counter move. What they're more concerned with is the negative impacts of making that move or counter move. And it's almost like they are, what's that old terminology that you talk about in your econ classes, or you talk about just in business classes in general? Paralysis by analysis. And they spend all their time analyzing the information, and they just can't get to the point where they can pull the plug, and it gets extremely difficult for them. And it's again, it functions as a game of chess, and it's almost like a lack of decision-making capability with a lot of executives. And that's why that some executives, and they talk about it, whether you're listening to CNN or Fox News or Wall Street station, they're always talking about the ability of a leader in a company, of a given company, to make strategic decisions and to be able to pull that lever and jump in and either make moves for the company or establish a position where they can make counter moves to other companies within their market or within their industry. And on the AMC framework, again, you've got your academics. They love this. They love the framework, the AMC framework, and its awareness, motivation, and capability. And that, again, in the text they talk about it's a level of competitive, tension that among any group of companies within a market or an industry. And in the AMC framework, if you kind of stop and think about it, it's A is for watch for competitors' moves. That's your awareness piece. You've got to be focused on not only your industry, but the market and trying to determine what's going to be your competitor's next move. The M, the motivation, it's for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And I think that's what Newton's third law or something. And so they throw that piece in, and to a certain extent, that's true. You've got a move, a competitive move made by one company. You've got a counter move made by another company, and then it's move and counter move trying to establish that competitive advantage in any given market. And C is, again, they talk about capability, and thinking is easy, acting is difficult. And a lot of times you would like to act, but some companies just don't have the strategic plan in place. They don't have the resources that they can allocate to a new counter move. And so sometimes the capability is just not there. And again, we go back, and I mentioned it, multiple times, even in the past, and in some other classes that I've taught, is it's all based on mutual interdependence. It's again, you're talk about your theory of the firm in your micro classes, and that was one of the things that the professors, I'm sure, talked about with respect to oligopoly. It's that mutual interdependence, knowing that the moves you make is going to impact the decisions that the other companies in your market are going to make, and vice versa. The moves and the strategic plans that they implement are going to impact the decisions you make. That's what drives that concept of mutual interdependence. And then the authors start out by talking about responding to a rival's move. And they talk about speed of response. That's a person. They talk about speed of response. And it's important when they talk about under attack. Again, it's a lot of business concepts are driven by, military strategy and rapid fire barrage of attacks. And, you've got head-to-head advertising, price cuts, attempts to grab, key customers. And you've got not only is your company doing it, but your competitors are all trying to do it. They're trying to go in there and grab it, whether it's advertising, price cuts, but everybody's jockeying for that consuming population. And, think about airlines. Think about Southwest, American, Delta, United. Think about travel websites, Expedia and, Kayak. They're all in there jockeying for that consuming population. Grocery stores. I mean, you're almost the number of ads that come across my cell phone or come through my Gmail on my computer. Here's the weekly specials that, here in Atlanta, it's Publix, it's Walmart, it's Kroger's, it's, I get them from Costco and Sam's Club and BJ's, and they're all, it's advertising and talking about prices, and they're all jockeying for that consuming population. So the speed in which you can respond as an executive is going to determine whether you can either hold on to that competitive advantage or build your competitive advantage. And the authors talk about long time between attack and response gives the attacker the edge. Fast responses tend to mitigate the attack. And I think not only in military strategy, but in the strategy of the business world. I think that's extremely true. They also talked in the text about Coke and Pepsi driving RC Cola out of business, Royal Crown. I mean, it was I don't say a huge brand when I grew up, but everybody knew what an RC was. RC. They talked about an RC Coca-Cola. It was, kind of a strange combination of adjectives and words, but and there was actually a restaurant in Buffalo that still served RC. That was their cola. That was the the brand of cola. They didn't have Coke, they didn't have Pepsi, but they still served RC Cola. Then the second strategy of responding to a competitor's moves or a rival's move is a midpoint competition. And it's a situation where a company faces the same rival in more than one market. And they talk about R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris, two heavyweights in the tobacco industry. When they were threatening one market, companies often retaliate in other geographic regions, competing U.S. markets in addition to global markets. And that's where you're talking about the midpoint competition. Can become difficult financially for both rivals. And where it becomes difficult financially is when they're trying to drive that price. Now, if you're trying to drive prices, it's great for, price competition is great for us as consumers, but it's not the best alternative when it comes to businesses trying to compete. And it's, again, you're talking about midpoint competition. And you have, let's just take Costco and Sam's Club. They compete, with each other with the same rival in more than one market. And they compete, I don't know if Sam's Club has tried to compete globally. I know Costco has in some of the European or some of the Asian and European markets. I think Walmart has tried in some markets and done well in some, but maybe not so well in others. But you're really talking about competing in those global markets. Again, go back to R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris. Smoking has been, or tobacco products in general, have been somewhat constrained here in the United States. But there's huge opportunities in markets outside of the United States market for when it comes to tobacco products. And then the third, strategy for responding to rivals' moves is mutual forbearance. And it's when rivals realize that they have more to lose via aggression than they have to gain. And that's when they're starting to look at the bottom line, where they're talking about more to lose than they have to gain. You have airlines in some markets, realize this. It can lead to better performance by both firms, and it can increase. And if it ends up with better performance by both firms, you're talking about maximizing, personal utility or maximizing the consumer's utility. It's going to be a great boon for us as consumers if you've got two companies in a given market and they're practicing mutual forbearance, because there is the probability that their performance can increase. It could mitigate profit erosion for both companies. And again, you see this mutual forbearance. I guess I've seen it in the past more in oligopolies where they are depending on mutual they're talking about mutual independence and mutual forbearance. Okay, in the healthcare market in Southern California and San Diego market, you had two huge hospital systems. You had Scripps and you had Sharp. You had a couple of other smaller, systems. You had UCSD, which was a teaching research hospital. You had Mercy Hospital. But for the most part, it was Sharp and Scripps. And it was almost to a certain extent like mutual forbearance there, because they both contracted with all of the health plans in Southern California. My guess is they automatically, even though you would never have proven it, they were sharing information. The CEO of Scripps and the CEO of Sharp probably shared information on how they were contracting, what services they were providing, what issues they were having. And it actually made things better for the consumers in Southern California because of this mutual forbearance. And you had a similar situation in a lot of communities that had, especially in healthcare, that had two hospital systems competing. You had that in Buffalo. You've got it in a lot of markets where you've got two major hospital systems, and through mutual forbearance, it is a positive situation for the consuming population when it comes to healthcare goods and services. The fourth one is disruptive innovation. And remember, we've got disruptive innovation as one of the five types of competitive moves that a company can make. And now we've got it as a counter move to moves your rival makes. Disruptive innovation is, you can ignore the disruption. It's, and think, well, it's not going to be a replacement for the current situation. And the authors talk about Barnes and Noble took that approach, and for the most part, Barnes and Noble have been driven out of most markets by a lot of the online opportunities. Don't just take Amazon. You can buy all the books you need through Amazon. You just get out there and scratch around and find the titles you need. It's going to be cheaper than Barnes and Noble. The only downside is at Barnes and Noble, you can go in and you can pick the book up and you can touch it and you can leaf through it and decide whether it's the book you want. But if you buy it at Barnes and Noble, you just know you're going to pay more for it, probably, than if you bought it through Amazon. You've got engage in a counterattack using different goods and services. And that's what Apple did early on. They started producing computers that were easier to operate. They had more power to them. And they continued to kind of move up and establish that market in the laptop computer industry. Or you can directly match the competitor's move. Merrill Lynch did that when it came to internet stock trading. They were one of the first to jump in and match the competitors' moves when it came to trading stocks. And then the fifth, I guess, alternative or strategy that you can engage in when it comes to your rivals' competitive moves is fighting brands. And this one's actually kind of interesting. It's lower end brands introduced to protect market shares without damaging the existing brands. Think of all of your car manufacturers, and it doesn't matter whether it's GM, whether it's Ford. It's they've all got some lower, I call them lower cost, lower end models that they use to count as their fighting brands. They talk about Delta Airline in the text, and I think it was they had a lower end airline that probably the wheels fell off of. And then the one I remember most is like, and I'll pick Green Giant as far as fruits and vegetable. See a lot of Green Giant brands in a grocery store. When I was in graduate school, I worked for probably a year or so, working at a local grocery store at nights and on weekends, stacking groceries, stocking the grocery shelves. And usually you'd work Friday and Saturday and Sunday nights stocking grocery shelves at night after the store closed. And a lot of the groceries in Columbus had a couple of aisles that were called generic. They were the, quote, generic aisles. And they would have canned fruits and vegetables. They would have paper products. They would have a lot of the items that, necessities a lot of customers needed, but there were no brands on them. And, we knew that Green Giant and a lot of your, companies that provided canned fruits and vegetables also provided these generic brands. And, you'd go in there and it'd have, it'd say like green peas or green beans or lima beans or canned tomatoes. And it'd just be a generic brand. And, but it was like half the price of going and buying a brand name. And you had a lot of customers that would shop those generic aisles in the grocery store. And what they're trying to do is they were trying to match a competitor's lower prices on current brands in the short run but they can't raise prices in the long run for fear of damaging the brand. So that's why they do it. They're trying to grab those individuals that are cost sensitive or price sensitive. So they've got their, whether it's GM, Ford, or whether it's Green Giant, they've got their brand that they're going to sell at the brand price, but they're also trying to capture that market share down here with what they call fighting brands that are lower cost brands. Lower prices devalue the company's brand. So again, that's why they try to have these lower cost brands, because they don't want the lower prices devaluing their brand when it comes to goods and services provided to a consuming population. Pharmaceutical industry, when losing patents, and they're facing generic alternatives. Once you lose a patent and it goes generic, the price on most of these pharmaceuticals, the bottom falls out of them. You have Southwest, bought Air Trans, and now what's Delta and United going to do? They've had their own, trying to their fighting brand, their lower price brand. Fighting brands is a time-tested competitive move, and they talk about it in the text about they, Budweiser, as far as the fighting brand, they didn't want to devalue the Budweiser brand, and they put out this, Busch beer. And I can remember, being in college, and they'd say, "Yeah, I'm going to head to the mountains of Busch beer," and it was cheap beer. You were a college student, and I'm sure that, we were, you drank Beast, Old Milwaukee's Best, and you drank Busch beer, and you had Pabst Blue Ribbon, and it was college students and didn't have a lot of money, and I'm sure college students are doing the same thing today. And with that, we've kind of gone through the 5 types of strategies that you can use to offset a rival's competitive moves. And we're going to stop there. And when we come back, we're going to talk for a few minutes about, looks like we're going to talk for a few minutes about cooperative moves. Talk to everybody in a few minutes.